Okay. We are starting up. As you can see, the House is still debating this STTC thing, so I believe this is Francais, man. We're going to go ahead and tune into this.
Gave $58 million to 10 ineligible projects, which in several cases showed no impact on the environment and no development of green technology. So $392 million for projects where members of the board of directors were in a conflict of interest. The Auditor General clearly indicated that responsibility for this scandal falls on this Liberal government, which did not give sufficient oversight to these contracts which were given out to Liberal insiders. And you, Mr. Speaker, indicated that the government violated an order of the House which required that the government provide the documents to the police so that they could undertake a criminal investigation. Last week, in the National Post, there was a summary of all of this, and Mr. Speaker, I'll boost what the National Post journalist said. He said that the Liberals are refusing to be transparent with Canadians, and said that by not divulging this information is very important because it goes against a decision of the Speaker of the House of Commons, something the government doesn't have the right to do. The Liberal government continues to provide redacted documents on the so-called green slush funds a month after they were reprimanded for doing so by the Speaker of the House of Commons. In a letter tabled in Parliament Monday, the Commons law clerk said to MPs that he had received new documents from 3 departments on SDTC. And I'll continue. I'm still referring to the article. In 3 cases, the information had not been provided. In June, 3 opposition parties, 1, 2, 3, came together to adopt a Conservative motion ordering the Public Service, the Auditor General, and SDTC to provide all the documents on this issue to the law clerk. The motion did not call for information to be held back or redacted. This motion also asked the law clerk to provide the documentation to the RCMP. The House clearly ordered the production of certain documents, and that order has clearly not been respected, as indicated in the September 27th decision. And I'll continue referring to the National Post. For this reason, the Speaker was forced to come to the conclusion that a question of privilege, a prima facie breach of privilege, had been reached, and it was suggested that the question be sent to a study for further study. So the Speaker ruled that the government had probably violated the absolute power of the House of Commons to request information. In a report published in the spring, the Auditor General concluded that one of the 6 projects funded by SDTC that she had audited was not eligible and that the organization had major governance problems. The day the audit was published, the government announced that it was going to abolish the fund and that it would be folded into the National Research Council. And here I'll stop referring to the National Post article. So that's part of the article from October 21st, and it gives a pretty good summary of what we have been eloquently talking about in the House for the last 2 weeks. And we're not going to give up. We're not going to stop talking, Mr. Speaker, because this is a clear scandal. And we have a government in front of us that's hiding information, that wants to continue to hide information, and that doesn't want to send the information to police. They can say what they want. We know that there is a scandal, and now we have the right to go further, and that's where we are today. And witness statements at committee on SDTC have unveiled more instances of Liberal corruption. A whistleblower indicated that that it's not the mandate of the Auditor General to investigate criminal matters. And the whistleblower said that they weren't surprised the Auditor General hadn't found evidence of criminal work because that's not the Auditor General's mandate. The real failure with this in this situation is that it's impossible to hold this government accountable. And we see that our system and our democratic institutions have been corrupted by political interference. it shouldn't have taken 2 years for these problems to come to light, and a simple process what should have been a simple process became a bureaucratic nightmare, which allowed SDTC to waste millions of dollars over a couple of years. And I'll continue referring to what the witness said at committee. I think that the government is more interested in protecting itself and avoiding this becoming a major scandal. They'd rather protect those who did something wrong instead of fixing the situation. And here I'll end my reference to the witness's comments. This is not an anomaly for this government. This is not the first time something like this has happened. I'll remind you that a $40 million scandal, the sponsorship scandal, ended the Liberal government of the day 20 years ago. And now we have another scandal, $400 million today. Last week, the Auditor General and, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General, every time she has a file in front of her, she has to produce a report that's full of terrible results. I don't think there's been any Auditor General report in the last number of years where a government program hasn't come out with a whole bunch of problems having been identified. She confirmed that her office is launching an inquiry into GC strategies. I think everybody probably remembers this. I know that time goes quickly around here, but I think everyone remembers the ArriveCan scandal. The Auditor General has announced that she's starting an investigation because GC Strategies got $100 million from this government since the current Prime Minister became Prime Minister. And it seems that several $1 million of contracts were awarded without tender to this business. Now, just on the Arrive scam, GC Strategies got $20 million in taxpayers' money for an application that should have cost $80,000. As such, the Auditor General accepted to look into all payments and contracts received by GC Strategies with the Government of Canada beyond ArriveCan. Because, between ArriveCan and all the other contracts that they got, between this, since the government came to power in 2015, that's a lot of money. They admitted, GC Strategies, that they were paid over $2,000 an hour for recruitment, and they were billing the government 1,500 times a month. Imagine how somebody's apparently just sending bills all day, every day, if they're billing 1,500 times a month. It's just incredible to think about. GC Strategies started getting contracts from the government just a couple of weeks after the government came to power, November 4th, 2015. And the company was founded just a few weeks before that. And there are more and more revelations that have come out, recently. They bragged that they had close links with highly placed members of the government. And they bragged that they were able to refuse appearing before a committee. Earlier this year, the founder of GC Strategies, Christian Firth, saw his house searched by the RCMP in their investigation into Arrive scam. Canadians deserve a government that will treat their money with respect. Only the Conservatives, the common sense Conservatives, will fight to shed light on how the Prime Minister gave millions and millions of dollars to this questionable company. So, with that, Mr. Speaker, back to the Green Slush Fund scandal, $400 million given to Liberal insiders. We have the Auditor General who's starting an investigation into GC Strategies, which for the last 9 years, oddly enough, has got $100 million in contracts from this government, including $20 million for the Arrive scam. So that, brings us back to everything that's happened over the last 9 years. And I think in my case, what history is going to remember of this Prime Minister and his record, and of this government's record, will be just a laundry list of scandals. Scandals upon scandals. I think that'll be the title of, the chapter in the history books. Scandal, scandal, scandal. Something like that. There's the Aga Khan Island trip, for example. I think it's the first time that a prime minister was, found in contraventions of ethics laws.
This translator's funny.
The There was the firing of Jody Wilson-Raybould because she didn't help SNC-Lavalin get around, federal laws. We spent weeks and weeks talking about the SNC-Lavalin scandal. I think some people have forgotten it, but Ms. Wilson-Raybould certainly hasn't forgotten about it. The We Charity scandal. We're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars here that were given to We Charity, an organization that benefited from government money while directly helping the Prime Minister. Listen, I won't go into the details, but, again, it's the same kind of scandal. Another scandal that maybe flew a little bit under the radar was during the pandemic. At that time, I was looking into procurement during the pandemic, and we took our PPE reserves and we shipped all that to China, all of our personal protective equipment. And when I asked, hey guys, listen, we're going to need that at some point, they said, oh, listen, you're a racist. And I said, listen, I don't see what the link is here, but we sent our equipment, our protective equipment to China, and what happened? Well, 3 weeks later, we were in trouble. We needed that equipment, and we didn't have any left because we'd sent it all away. So what happened? Well, a big contract, $80 million, was given for masks, and the stuff that came in, well, it was garbage. We couldn't even use it. So what happened then? Well, Liberals said, listen, we gave the money away. Too bad. Yet another scandal. And what's even worse is that it cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to destroy those masks that couldn't be used. It's, just scandal upon scandal, and it continues. The former MP, Frank Baylis, came in during the pandemic. He said, listen, I'm going to build you some respirators. I'm going to make 10,000 respirators for you. It's going to cost $325 million. No, $226 million, rather. We're not at $100 million, here or there. But, 10,000 respirators, well, first of all, it didn't seem like we needed them because there weren't enough emergency rooms to use them. And then second, the market cost for those should have been $100 million less. But when we asked Mr. Baylis the question in committee, how do you justify charging $226 million to Canadian taxpayers for equipment that should cost $125 million max? He said, oh, well, listen, once again, administrative costs. Oh, I need to keep my staff. It was bullshit, Mr. Speaker. Everyone knows that.
Whoa, he even translated the swear word.
Distributed. It was sent out. Thanks. That's it. Canadian taxpayers paid for it. We could talk about Mackenzie. Mackenzie, which ended up with hundreds of contracts to do things, to make reports, to publish reports that served no purpose whatsoever. It was very hard to get to the bottom of that and understand why they got this money. We have 100,000 experts in the public service who could have done these reports, so it's not clear why the money had to go to Mackenzie. Well, again, connected Liberals. And scandals, listen, I've got, so many of them in front of us, It's dizzying how many scandals we've seen. And unfortunately, as I said earlier, we have a tendency to forget things as humans. And that's where we're at today. We have this government across the way, a prime minister who came in and said, listen, I'm going to be perfect. I'm going to be the best in the world. Canada is back. It's going to be great. And, after 9 years, it's incredible. We've doubled the country's debt. We're paying $50 billion a year in interest, and now we have a $400 million spending scandal, money given to Liberal insiders for a program that should have been helping the environment. That was, it's like that promise from the election that we're going to plant 2 billion trees. They said, we're going to plant 2 billion trees, and everyone said, okay, yeah, sure, great, good idea. But they're far from having planted 2 billion trees, Mr. Speaker. And now to come back to SDTC, we were in favor of this. This is a conservative idea to invest in green technology to help the environment. But once again, instead of doing things properly, as the Prime Minister promised he would do in 2015, $400 million was given to Liberal insiders who did nothing with it, and that money is gone. So where are we going, Mr. Speaker? We know that we're not going anywhere under this government, and that's where we've reached a point where we need to bring the government down. You know, at the end of the day, everyone's tired of this, and we have a certain duty here, because if we don't do this, if we don't remind Canadians what's happened, people are going to forget. So that's why we're here. We're going to maintain the pressure on this government. We're going to keep moving forward. We're never going to accept the corruption. We're never going to accept that millions and millions, even billions of dollars now after 9 years have been given to Liberal insiders left and right. People who've said, why, when you ask them, why does it cost more? And they say, well, listen, that's how it goes. That's the way it is. No, Mr. Speaker. This needs to end. And I can confirm that a Conservative government, in the coming weeks, in the coming months, will bring order back to this country, will stop giving hundreds of millions of dollars to people. When you ask them, why does it cost so much? They say their only answer is, well, that's how it is. No, we need to bring an end to this. So thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that we will have a new government very soon. We have time for a very short question, for questions and comments.
For a question and 30 seconds for an answer. The Honourable Member from Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, the member talked on so many things. Why doesn't it speak about the economy, current state of economy today? Inflation is down to 1.6%. Interest rates have been reduced 4 times to 3.75% and is expected to go to 3% or less by July 2025. Rents are coming down and renting is becoming more affordable.
What?
Consumer confidence index is increasing 30 months high. Why doesn't it talk about that?
Rent is becoming affordable.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg,
Is he living in Canada?
Well, thank you. I'd like to thank my colleague for his question. My colleague would like me to say, interest rates are going down. Oh, things are getting better. But listen, what happened, Mr. Speaker?
Yeah, okay.
Over the last couple of years? Well, the Bank of Canada has made incredible efforts and made people pay more interest because this government's doubled the debt for this country. That's what's happened over the last couple of years. The Honourable Member will have 9 minutes remaining for questions and comments after question period. It is now time for statements by members.
Okay, statements by members. The Honourable Member from Oakville North, Burlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Marathon of Hope Cancer Centre Networks is a bold collaboration that is bringing precision medicine to Canadian cancer patients. In 2016, Terry Fox Research Institute's founding president and scientific director, Dr. Victor Ling, told me, quote, "We have the roadmap to cure cancer. All we need is $150 million from the federal government," end quote. In Budget 2019, we invested that $150 million to create the Marathon of Hope Cancer Centres Network. Canada's brightest minds are now working with a common vision to revolutionize cancer research in Canada. This week, they're here to talk to parliamentarians about their work, and tomorrow night, we'll be at a reception with Terry Fox's brother Daryl, Dr. Andre Villette, and others to share the good news about their progress. Terry Fox said, "Anything is possible if you try. Dreams are made possible if you try." And because of this, Team Canada of Cancer Research, the dream of a world without cancer is closer than ever. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Then why'd you guys take him out of the passport?
The Honourable Member
You like
from
him so
Edmonton,
much. Why'd you
Riverbend.
take him out?
On World Mental Health Day, Mental Health Research Canada released their landmark collaborative national report titled A Generation at Risk, the State of Youth Mental Health in Canada. This report brings together research and lived experiences to help us better understand the youth mental health crisis. 3 key takeaways: declining mental health, service gaps and access barriers, and collaborative action. While 19% of youth accessed mental health services last year, an additional 9% are still in need of care but not receiving it. The report outlines key recommendations to improve youth mental health, including enhancing prevention, improving the quality of mental health services, and expanding access. A special thank you to the organizations involved in the report, including Arrow Vert, Jack.org, Kids Help Phone, National Association of Friendship Centres, Strongest Families Institute, Youth in Mind Foundation, Youth Wellness Hubs, and of course, Bell Let's Talk. Thank you all for your continued support in building a future of better mental health for all.
The Honourable Member from Nepean.
Mr. Speaker, to house asylum claimants, the City of Ottawa is proposing glorified tents called spunk structures. Their proposed locations are far away at about 20 to 25 kilometers from other support systems needed for asylum seekers. We have to treat people with dignity, and herding them into proposed structure is not the way to accommodate them. Hence, I firmly oppose the City of Ottawa proposal to accommodate asylum seekers in Barhaven using a sprint structure. The city should use federal funds in a more productive way, like upscaling existing buildings that provide actual homes, security, privacy, and dignity. There is a significant decrease in the number of asylum seekers. Using funds to create more livable place today means they are available as affordable housing tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Rivière-des-Mille-Îles. Mr. Speaker, 40 years, 4 decades, or 14,610 days, calculated any way you like, it's a lot of time invested in a cause. It's a strength of unshakable conviction, and above all, it's the exceptional career of a Saint-Eustache City Councillor, Raymond Tessier. First elected to the Saint-Eustache Municipal Council in 1984, Raymond Tessier truly embodies a sense of the common good. His closeness to citizens, his ability to listen, and his determination to act make him a respected and appreciated leader and a pillar of our local democracy. By equaling the record of my colleague from Bécancour, Nicolas Sorel, Raymond Tessier also demonstrates that political commitment knows no bounds as long as it's from the heart. Raymond, I'm convinced that your desire to improve the quality of life of our citizens has allowed you to make your mark and influence, obviously for the better, future generations. Thank you, my friend Raymond, for your dedication and passion. The Honourable Member for Alfred Pellan. Mr. Speaker, the Association for Seniors Living in Laval, an Alfred Pellan organization that has enriched the lives of Laval seniors, celebrated its 50th anniversary with a magnificent evening organized by and for local seniors. Over the past 5 decades, the association has been a place of social integration, offering services and resources needed to overcome loneliness, preserve autonomy, and help people stay in their own homes. I am deeply grateful for the work accomplished by the entire team and volunteers. Thanks to their dedication, they have been able to meet the diverse needs of our residents with care and respect, making the association a true place where each member feels valued and supported. Congratulations on this important milestone, and best wishes for many more years to come. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Prince Albert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last night was a general election in my home province of Saskatchewan, and I'd like to congratulate Sask Party, led by Premier Scott Moe, on their victory. To all those who knocked on doors, volunteered to run as candidates, and went onto the polls and voted, your participation in our democracy is what it means to be a proud Saskatchewanian. Elections don't run themselves, and democracies can't happen without the people. I'd like to congratulate Alana Ross, Eric Schmaltz, Darlene Roden, Todd Gowdy, Terry Bowman, Kevin Kassoon on your recent election victory. I would also like to thank Fred Bradshaw, Joe Hargrave, Nadine Wilson, and Delbert Kirsch for their many years of service. I look forward to working with each and every one of my provincial counterparts, for both new and old faces, to continue to serve the people of Saskatchewan. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Labrador.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and each year 28,000 Canadians are diagnosed with breast cancer, and thousands more live with its lasting impact. Breast cancer remains the most commonly diagnosed cancer among Canadian women. As a 2-time survivor of breast cancer, first diagnosed at age 42, I know firsthand the importance of early detection. That is why I've long advocated for reducing the screening age from 50 to 40 in Canada, so women don't have to wait for mammography testing, but rather have choice. I encourage all provinces to follow the lead of the United States and Ontario, Manitoba, British Columbia, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the Yukon, which have already reduced mammography screening to age 40. Liberals agree, and so does the Canadian Cancer Society, that we need new national benchmarks to ensure women across the country have access to early screening and detection. Mr. Speaker, I am proof that early detection saves lives, so I encourage all women today, get your mammogram. It could make all the difference in your lives as well.
The honourable member from Richmond Centre.
Mr. Speaker, almost 2 years ago, we learned that several countries, including China, Russia, and India, are trying to interfere in the democratic process in Canada. Last June, the National Security of Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians tabled a report alleging that certain parliamentarians are unwitting or witting participants in the efforts to interfere by foreign states in Canada's democratic process. There are serious and worrying allegations that have sowed doubt in our democratic institution. Since that time, all opposition leaders except one have chosen to obtain their security clearance to be able to act on foreign interference within their parties. The public inquiry into foreign interference have made clear that every member of this chamber has a responsibility to combat foreign interference in our democracy. I have a simple question for the leader of the Conservative Party. When will he get his security clearance and put the safety of Canadians before partisan politics?
Who said it earlier that they're just going to keep running with that? Like, it's beating a dead horse for sure.
The honourable member from Dolphin, Swan River, Nipawin.
Mr. Speaker, the Jasper wildfire investigation has uncovered damning evidence that reveals the Liberal government was grossly negligent in protecting Jasper. To cover up his government's failures, the Prime Minister appointed a minister for Jasper's recovery. The Jasper wildfire investigation ordered the minister to testify 20 days ago, but now we learn he is refusing to testify until December.
Unbelievable.
If the minister in charge of Jasper's recovery takes 2 months to show up at committee, how long will it take him to rebuild Jasper? For years, multiple Liberal environment ministers were warned by experts that Jasper was a tinderbox ready to ignite. As warning letters piled up, so did the deadfall in Jasper National Park. But instead of taking action, the Liberals ignored experts and allowed Jasper to burn. The Jasper wildfire investigation has revealed one thing for sure. The Liberal government is nothing more than fake environmentalists.
That's right.
Here, here.
Well done.
Didn't they put Randy in
The
charge?
honourable member from Hamilton Mountain.
Speaker, by now we all know that Conservatives prefer to ignore the truth and spread fear. So it should come to no surprise to any of us that the Conservative leader continues to refuse top-secret security clearance and a briefing by intelligence officials. He prefers to speculate on what could be true and claims that learning the truth would prevent him from speaking on a topic. Is it because he has problems with the truth? Is he not able to tell the truth? Or maybe he's afraid of the ugly truth that he could learn about his own party, about his own leadership race. Canadians should be alarmed that the leader of the opposition continues to ignore the risks to our national security within his own party. We all want to know, what is he trying to hide?
The honourable member from Hastings, Lennox and Addington.
The Liberal NDP carbon tax is fueling an affordability crisis that Canada has not seen in generations. According to Food Banks Canada, a shocking 2 million Canadians use a food bank in a month. And to be clear, it's not just the unemployed or those with limited income who are needing this. Nearly 1 in 5 have full-time work, and this increase in usage is causing havoc on food banks themselves. Nearly 30% are running out of food. People who were donating 9 years ago are now the ones standing in line. I've spent most of my life in rural Ontario, and never, ever has food bank usage been this high. And worst of all, Mr. Speaker, is that nearly 1/3 of them are children. Despite record-high food bank use, the NDP Liberals continue to increase the cost of groceries by increasing the carbon tax by 23% on their way to quadruple the tax. Mr. Speaker, food insecurity is real, and many Canadians are desperate. This Prime Minister must call a carbon tax election. Will he?
Let's go.
The honourable member from the Bay of Quinte.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this Liberal government, rents have doubled, mortgage payments have doubled, the amount needed for a down payment has doubled. The dream of home ownership has slipped away from Canadians. That's why Common Sense Conservatives have announced we will axe the federal sales tax on all new home sales. That means for under $1 million. That means for a house for $800,000, there'll be an annual savings of a one-time savings of $40,000 and then $2,200 of annual mortgage payment savings. And people agree this is great. Eric Lombardi, housing advocate, said, "I'm glad to see this. It's much needed change." And Richard Lyle, the Residential Construction Council, said, "We commend the Conservative leader and his party for putting forward this plan." Mr. Speaker, home ownership shouldn't be because of a GST-sized surprise. Only Conservatives will build homes and make sure that they're more affordable. Conservatives will axe the tax, build the homes, and bring it home to Canadians and their families.
The honourable member from Mississauga East Cooksville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we were elected to this chamber to represent all Canadian communities and uphold our nation's sovereignty. Democracy belongs to everyone. Yet the Conservative leader seems to fight only for Conservatives rather than for all Canadians. Despite aspiring to become Prime Minister, obtaining a security clearance, staying informed, and making decisions based on evidence rather than ideology is the responsible approach. Yet, the Conservative leader is still the only party leader to refuse to get his security clearance and to act on foreign interference in his own party, Mr. Speaker. So I ask the leader of the Conservative Party, why? Why won't he get his security clearance? Who is he trying to protect? And what does he have to hide?
Hear, hear.
Great maiden speech.
Colleagues. The honourable member from Churchill-Kiwatanuk-Askey.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today because unlike what lawyers for the Liberals are arguing when they fight First Nations in court, we in the NDP believe in First Nations' right to clean drinking water. Canada shamefully argues that First Nations are to blame for the lack of clean drinking water. Their lawyers even said, quote, "Canada doesn't stop you from helping yourself," unquote. On the one hand, Liberals in Parliament say that all First Nations deserve clean drinking water, while on the other, Liberal-hired lawyers say in court that these aren't statements that should be taken seriously. But if we can't take Liberals' words seriously, let's look at their actions. We're now 1,338 days since the Liberals promised to eliminate all long-term boil water advisories with no end in sight. In my riding, Shamattawa and Tatasquat Cree Nation are fighting the Liberals over that failure. The tap water in Barons River has been brown since May and is a danger to people's health, including those on dialysis. It's time for the Liberals to call off their lawyers, recognize First Nations' right to clean water, and deliver it.
You make $200K a year. I'm sure you can buy a few wells, honey, if you really want to change the
The
problem.
Mouvement Autonome et Solidaire des Sans-Emploi is on the Hill today to launch the 2024-2025 edition of their Employment Insurance Report, a document that paints a portrait of the problems experienced by the unemployed and tells the story of the many failures of the system in their lives. A program under federal jurisdiction that is unjust and completely obsolete that the Liberal government has promised to reform on numerous occasions and has done nothing about. After 10 years, it's time for the government to take concrete action for workers. Massey, the CNC, and Quebec's major unions are leading a big campaign under the theme Employment Insurance Must Protect Us, to demand that the injustices and inequities of employment insurance be corrected. The Bloc Québécois supports them. Solidarity.
The honourable member from Dufferin-Caledon.
After 9 years, these NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost of housing. Rent has doubled. Housing prices have doubled. You used to pay off your mortgage in 25 years. Now it takes 25 years to save for the down payment. Thankfully, Conservatives have a plan. We will axe the GST on new homes. On an $800,000 house, this will save $40,000. This tax cut will spark 30,000 additional homes being built every single year. The Canadian Home Builders Association said today's announcement by the Conservative Party of Canada will make a big difference. The West End Home Builders Association said removing the GST for new homes under $1 million million may be the most significant housing policy commitment in the past 2 decades. NDP Liberals puff up with fake pride with every fake photo op they have on housing. Common sense Conservatives will get the houses built for all Canadians.
The honourable member from Winnipeg North.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, on this side of the House, we recognize that foreign interference is a serious issue. We're not alone, Mr. Speaker. Canadians from coast to coast to coast understand and appreciate how important this issue is. We have the Conservative Party and the leader of the Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker, that is putting his self-interest and the interest of the Conservative Party of Canada over the interest of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. And I find that is very shameful. At the end of the day, the leader of the Green Party, the NDP Party, the Bloc Party, and the Prime Minister all have the security clearance. Only the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada has chosen not to get that security clearance.
Why?
What is it that the Conservative leader is hiding? Is there something in his past that Canadians should know about, Mr. Speaker? I believe the leader needs to step up, get the security clearance today, or tell Canadians what he is scared of.
Here, here.
Holy crap.
Wow.
I think that dude just blew a gasket. All right, question period. Let's go.
Alors?
Order.
Trudeau's in the House. Pierre's in the House.
Questions. Questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A year ago, the Prime Minister copy and pasted my idea of eliminating GST on building of new homes. But that's the only thing he did because it has just driven up costs. Yesterday, I proposed eliminating GST on houses under $1 million, and the housing advisor of the PM, Mr. Mike Moffat, said that it's the most audacious proposal for middle class housing ever proposed by a political party. Will he accept my idea? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, when the Leader of the Opposition was the Minister of Housing for Stephen Harper, he failed in his job. He only built 6 affordable housing units across the country. Now he's proposing a program that will cut transfers to municipalities and investments that we're making in infrastructure to build more houses across the country. It's cuts to programs and services that Canadians are counting on, that the Conservatives are offering, and we are investing to build homes across the country for Canadians.
Dude can't even tie a tie. You see that thing's all crooked?
We're proposing to eliminate the GST on houses under $1 million. And this will save $25,000 on the purchase of a home, an average home in Quebec. That's a reduction of $1,000, $300 on mortgages per year. Will the PM send this money to his program? And even his minister saying his program is not building homes. Will he accept my program to cut bureaucracy and taxes to build new homes? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, what the Conservative leader wants to cut is the $900 million that we're sending to Quebec for the Housing Accelerator Fund to build homes across Quebec and the country. He wants to cut and remove $900 million that we're sending to Quebec to build more homes, to solve the challenges that Quebecers, and particularly young Quebecers, are facing. His solution isn't one because it always involves cuts to services and investments in programs that Canadians need. It's not cuts and austerity that Quebecers want. They want investment in a better world. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Took my idea last year to remove GST off rental housing construction. It's the only thing he's done right because, of course, after 9 years, he's doubled housing costs. So yesterday, I came up with another common sense idea. Let me quote his housing advisor, Mike Moffat. The Conservative leaders plan to eliminate the GST for newly constructed homes selling for under $1 million is the boldest middle-class housing proposal released to date from any federal political party. Will he accept my common sense idea.
Come on, Pierre, mention China interference. Come on, man, get to it.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Over the decades, Canadians learned the hard way. With Conservative promises, you always have to check the fine print. And the fine print on this one is they're going to cut the investments we're making across the country, working with municipalities to cut red tape, to invest in more housing, to invest in more affordable homes, to accelerate permitting and create densification. He's going to cut the services and programs and investments that Canadians are counting on to solve this housing crisis. That's all he offers, Mr. Speaker. Cuts to the programs and supports that Canadians need, whether it's the housing accelerator or housing and infrastructure investments. He's going to build slow homes.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He named the two bureaucracies I'll get rid of. One is ironically named the Housing Infrastructure Fund. $5 billion. How many houses is it built? Zero. How many pieces of infrastructure? Zero. Can you even apply for money for it? No. It's just for bureaucrats. Then there's the Housing Accelerator Fund, which his own Liberal housing minister says the fund doesn't go towards the cost of building houses. It doesn't actually lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. So why not take the money, axe the tax, and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is intending to cut the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is all about creating densification across our communities, accelerating the permitting and cutting red tape, using more public lands, creating more opportunities for public land to be used for the creation of affordable homes. It's about changing the way homes get built so they get built faster and more accessibly for Canadians. He's about cutting the programs and the services that Canadians rely on. That's what Canadians have learned about Conservative promises. Got to look at the fine print, and the fine print is cuts to things Canadians need.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Cuts to taxes Canadians pay, Mr. Speaker. We will axe the tax, the sales tax on new homes under $1 million, saving up to $50,000 on a new home or $2,700 in lower mortgage payments every single year. By contrast, in the last 3 years, the number of young people who have ownership of a home today has fallen by half under this Prime Minister and his incompetent housing minister. So why won't he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, Canadians have learned when Conservatives make promises, you've got to check the fine print. And the fine print on this one is cutting programs that are investing in building new homes right across the country, working with municipalities and delivering the homes that Canadians, particularly young Canadians, need. Now, if the Leader of the Opposition actually cared about young Canadians, he wouldn't be standing against the fact that we're asking wealthier Canadians to pay a little more in taxes to help young Canadians with buying a home, with creating a future, with creating the jobs that they need. We're going to continue to invest in young people for intergenerational fairness while he gives tax breaks to wealthiest.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly.
Right, let's hear what the Bloc has to say.
All the parties in this House supported at various stages different measures. One, to help 1 million retirees in Quebec and across the country, and others to support farmers. We gave the government 5 weeks, and then the government said no. I'm wondering if the Prime Minister is saying that our proposal is bad because they voted in favour of it. And why does he not ask the relevance of the question to Quebecers with regard to his election? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc leader knows full well that in terms of protecting our farmers, we're moving forward and we're here to protect supply management. We're here to ensure that the Senate will adopt this legislation or an equivalent bill because we'll always be here to protect our farmers. In terms of our seniors, we'll also always be here to protect them, whether it's in terms of dental care that has now been delivered to almost 1 million Canadians, particularly seniors. And we're also here to increase the GIS and extend OAS for older seniors. We're always going to be here for seniors. The Honourable Member for Ballet-Chambly. It's like the insane asylum. The Conservatives want to invest, table a motion to get rid of the government. They have to stop filibustering. And now the Conservatives are protecting the government, strangely enough. And now the Conservatives' obstruction seems to be in favour of the Liberals because they don't want to work more. Can we stop this nonsense and trigger an election, Mr. Speaker?
So then do it. Do it, Blanchet. If you want an election, call for one. You voted against an election twice. So you're saying that if we table another non-confidence vote, you're going to vote with it? The Bloc better follow up on that, man.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister. We can clearly see who is here in this House to play politics and who's here to work. I will ask the Prime Minister to start from the top, please. Mr. Speaker, we can clearly see who here in this House is here to play petty politics and who is here to deliver for Canadians. It's exactly what we are doing by providing dental care across this country to help almost 1 million Canadians with dental care. And we have been here to invest in more daycare spots, and we're going to continue to be here to deliver insulin free of charge for people who need it, who cannot afford it, and to provide contraceptives for people who need it. We have work to do, and we are doing it for Canadians.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
Rogers is ripping off Canadians with hidden TV box fees. Again, the Conservatives laugh about this while Canadians get ripped off. Very interesting. The Liberals help them do it by allowing the merger, the multi-billion-dollar merger with Shaw. And the Conservatives not only are laughing, but they don't care about it because their Conservative leader gets big checks from Edward Rogers. Oh, that makes sense. I get it now.
Colleagues, in order for us to get through question period in the required time, it's important that members not be interrupted and that the chair can hear the question. And invite the Honourable Member from Burnaby South to start from the top and to ask his question. The Honourable Member.
I'm curious if the Conservatives are going to laugh again when I mention that Canadians are getting ripped off by Rogers, who is charging them hidden fees every month when they rent their TV box. Now, I know that the Liberals have helped Rogers do that by allowing the multi-billion-dollar merger with Shaw. The Conservatives don't care about helping Canadians because their leader gets big checks from Edward Rogers. But my question is to the Prime Minister. Will he commit today to forcing Rogers to reverse these fees or ban them from receiving any federal contracts?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, over the past number of years, we've seen data fees and cell phone fees decrease across this country because of the efforts this government has brought in for more competition and for support for consumers. We know there's always more to do. We're going to continue to hold the telcos to account to deliver high-quality services to Canadians at affordable prices. That's something that we will continue to be there for.
I just lost brain cells listening to those two
The
talk.
Honourable Member for Burnaby South.
Allowed a massive merger to happen.
In her documentary La Peur au Ventre, Leah Clermont-Dion shows that the anti-abortion movement is gaining ground. She shows how anti-abortionists are pulling Conservative strings. The Liberals, for their part, have not improved access to abortion. When will the Prime Minister finally ensure safe and equitable access to abortion across the country? The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He
Mr.
went from
Speaker,
TV to abortion.
as a party and as a government, we always have been here to protect women's rights. We'll continue to do so and to increase access to health care services, reproductive services across the country. At the same time, I share the concerns of my colleague from the NDP. In terms of the Conservatives and particularly there are members, Quebec Conservative members, that don't say anything when they have to defend women's rights. They don't speak up to fight back against conservative attacks against the women's right to choose. And
All right, get him.
the Honourable Leader of the Opposition, Mr. Speaker, the Bloc has done a flip-flop after voting 188 times to keep this government in power. It's the most centralizing and expansionist government in history. They've kept them in power. They voted two more times this fall in a confidence vote, even though they gave nothing to farmers or seniors. Once again, can the Bloc vote with us to end this government that does less for Quebec?
Will the NDP finally break off its costly coalition with the government and call a carbon tax election?
I listened carefully to the question of the Leader of the Opposition. We've been through this before. At some point, the chair is going to have to cut questions if we continue to have questions which don't deal with the administration of government. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the very angry housing minister has been up all night trying to dream up some snarky comment in response to the very popular announcement Common Sense Conservatives made yesterday to axe the federal sales tax on homes under $1 million. Something that his own advisor, Dr. Mike Moffat, has said is the most bold announcement of any federal party for middle-class home ownership. He took my idea on GST for rental housing. Will he accept this common sense plan to axe the tax?
There's a lot of chatter coming. I can only identify the member from New Westminster Burnaby, but I would warn other members, please, to not take the floor unless recognized by the chair. It's important for question period to happen during the time that it's supposed to happen. The Honourable Minister for Infrastructure, Housing and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, with all the time and energy he spends on me, I'm going to have to send him a check for the time I've been living rent-free in his head. But I got to tell you, yesterday, make no mistake, the Conservative leader announced he would make multi-billion-dollar cuts to programs that will get homes built in this country. Now, he knows that, and we can agree on that piece. What he doesn't know is his caucus colleagues have been going behind his back, writing me letters advocating for their communities to receive funding through the Housing Accelerator Fund because they believe it will get more homes built. My question for the Conservative members of his caucus, will they have the courage to stand up and tell him he's wrong?
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, it's the only rent he hasn't doubled. And nobody else has to tell that member that he's wrong because he told himself. This is what he said about his own Housing Accelerator Fund. Let me quote it. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually go towards the cost of building houses. It doesn't actually lead to the construction of specific homes. The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. And he's right. Since he started forking over these big checks, construction has gone down in the major municipalities that has received it. So will he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the home?
I ask all members once again, including the member from Hamilton Centre, to please not take the floor. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, there was a time not so long ago when the Conservative leader was actually advocating the government do more to increase density near the services that people need. Infrastructure already exists. There was a time when he was actually advocating to do something to reduce development cost charges to make it cheaper to build homes in this country. There was a time he was advocating the government do something to actually speed up the process of permitting. Now that we've actually moved forward with billions of dollars of investments that are getting homes built, making changes, he's changed his view and says we should do nothing on any of these programs and blames the government for making the investments he once thought was a good idea. We're going to do what it takes to build homes. I wish he'd join us.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, He's done precisely the opposite. Since he gave Toronto $500 million, that city hall has jacked up development taxes by 40%. No wonder construction is down 20%. That's probably why Dr. Mike Moffat, the minister's housing advisor, said that it's hard to deny that the Housing Accelerator Fund is turning out to be nothing more than a heist of tax dollars flowing from the feds to the municipality. Wow. So enough with the heists. Won't he cut the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the home?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I sometimes ask myself where they found this guy. He twists the facts to suit his narrative whenever he wants. It's almost like the Conservative Party, when looking for a new leader, hopped on Temu, typed in far-right Conservative, and then spit this guy out instead. He opposes investments in affordable housing. He borrows lessons from his cousin south of the border when he opposes birth control for women. During the January 6th of Canada, the convoy, he wasn't just telling people to stand by, he was bringing them coffee in the streets. Mr. Speaker, it might be election season in America. We don't need this far right-wing populism here at home.
Yeah, we do need an election here. If you listen to the people, and you'll be voted right out, Mr. Fraser.
The Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, speaking of leadership contestants, that member must be so uptight and angry because the polling shows that though Canadians want to fire that Prime Minister, the Housing Minister ranks dead last in the polls to replace him. And why wouldn't he? This is the guy who lost track of 1 million people when he was Immigration Minister. Right. He ignored warnings from his own department that letting in 200% more people would cause a housing shortage. And his own government spent the last week trashing his entire immigration record. How can arrogance and incompetence so comfortably reside in one man?
The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader asks how arrogance and incompetence can live so comfortably in one man. He manages to show us every single day. Mr. Speaker, let's actually look at the facts. While he's concerned about my polling numbers, I'm concerned about helping people in need. We put billions of dollars on the table to build or repair hundreds of thousands of homes in this country so vulnerable Canadians have a roof over his head. Let's look at his record. The worst level of home building in the last 10 years. And when he had the chance to help the most vulnerable, he simply got 6 units built across the entire country. The only thing he's done to help vulnerable people is show up with a video camera to treat those living without a roof over their head as props, and it's unacceptable.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the sum total of the chaos in our immigration system that happened under this government happened while he was the minister. His own subsequent Liberal successor has now denounced him and blamed him and his policies for the housing shortfall we have today. And now as housing minister, since he took office, the number of young people who own a home has gone from 47% down to 26% as he builds bureaucracy to block homes. Why doesn't he realize his failure, accept my common sense plan to axe the tax and build the home?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has said there's been consensus on immigration for 150 years. That means he's okay with the Chinese head tax. That means he's okay with not letting Jews in after the Second World War. That means, Mr. Speaker, that he's okay, and we know it already. He was in cabinet. He was okay with the barbaric practices snitch line. How does he want to fix things, Mr. Speaker? He wants to use math. Well, the last time he used math, he was the housing minister, and he could barely count to 6.
The Honourable Member for Montcalm. With 1 day to go before the start of advanced requests for MAID in Quebec, the federal government is still refusing to amend the criminal code. The expert committee has been calling for this for a year and a half. And the Liberals have been dragging their feet on this, daring to complain they don't have enough time to consult. It's not time that's lacking, it's courage. Today, the Liberals are creating worries for doctors who are concerned they won't be able to provide care. Do they realize that they are limiting access, to end-of-life care? The Honourable Minister of Health. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I lost my grandmother, and this is a very sensitive issue. It's a national conversation that is needed across the country, and with my provincial counterparts, I will do so. I would ask on the other side if they could cooperate with me to have time for a national conversation to make sure the system is ready and that we've had a conversation in every family across the country. I think that's very important. The Honourable Member from Montcalm. The Liberals lack courage and are complicating access to end-of-life care. And as if that weren't enough, they're passing the buck to the next government. Better off if today's ministers don't challenge Quebec's decision to accept advanced requests, but can they offer the slightest guarantee to those who will be in their place after the next election that they won't contest it? Of course not. Do they realize that they are shoveling the responsibility of legalizing advanced requests for MAID onto the Conservatives? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, it's not a question of courage, but rather of logic and compassion to ensure we've had time to make sure the system is ready for such a large change. And we have to make sure for such a sensitive topic as this that we have time in every family across the country to have a conversation. And that's the reason why we're having a national conversation now, not for a long time, just for the next period. And during this time, it's a good opportunity to talk and make sure our system is ready. The Honourable Member for Montcalm. It's not time to talk, but to take action. The Liberals are shoveling the decision on the legality of advanced requests onto the Conservatives. And this is a party that has been against any form of MAID since day one, a party that is infiltrated by the religious right, a party that finances itself with collection money from fanatical churches in the West. Imagine this is the party that will decide whether or not to legally protect doctors who provide end-of-life care to Quebecers. How can the Liberals be so irresponsible? The Honourable Minister of Health. Mr. Speaker, what's irresponsible is to take action without having the opportunity to make sure that the system is ready. And for me, this is absolutely essential. And that is why we're having a conversation across the country, not for a long time, just for a few months. For the entire history of our country. So it's illogical to take a few months to make sure the system is ready. We're having a conversation where all people in every family across the country can participate.
From Calgary, Nose Hill.
Mr. Speaker, I was dismayed that earlier in question period, in response to the Leader of the Opposition's question on housing, the Minister of Housing treated these questions like they were a joke. The reality, no, seriously, listen to them laugh now. Today, Scotiabank said that nearly 25% less Canadians can own a home now than when the minister took office. This is on top of the fact that housing has doubled under this government. Housing should be for everyone. Will the minister commit to axing the federal GST on new homes so that young Canadians can afford them?
The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, I thank the honourable member for her question. And to be clear, what the Conservative Party announced yesterday was billions of dollars worth of cuts to programs that are actually going to get homes built in this country. While she has portrayed herself as having a moral high ground in her question, I would remind her that it is a Conservative leader who showed up in Niagara with a video crew so he could call a woman's home a shack. It was her leader who goes to encampments across this country, not to see what he can do to help people, to put them in the background of his social media videos for likes. Mr. Mr. Speaker, people who are unhoused are not political props. They are human beings that deserve to be treated with respect and dignity.
The honourable member from Calgary Nose Hill.
The Housing Accelerator Fund doesn't actually directly build homes. Who said that? The Minister of Housing! This is the same man who juiced temporary visas knowing that students were sleeping under bridges and were performing sex acts because they couldn't afford rent. This minister has been allowed to fail upwards. Even his caucus members know that. So when will the Prime Minister stop letting this minister fail upwards while Canadians are failing to pay their rent?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, the attempt to link very challenging life circumstances to the government's Housing Accelerator Fund is beyond disingenuous. She wants to talk about what her colleague members know. They know that this fund is actually helping get more housing built in this country. There is a number of them who are writing me personally asking that their communities be picked for funding because they know that it's going to succeed in building more homes in their cities. Mr. Speaker, my question is whether they will have the courage to actually stand up and tell their leader that he is wrong to make billions of dollars of cuts to housing like he was wrong when he did it when he was the minister.
The honourable member for Bellechasse, Les Chemin-Lévis. After 9 years, the Bloc Liberal government has broken home ownership with rents and mortgage payments doubling. Today, 80% of Canadians believe that home ownership is reserved for the very rich. The Conservative leader is proposing to axe the GST on new homes, which will save $40,000 in mortgage payments on an $800,000 home. Will the government implement this proposal or continue to burden Canadians with ineffective programs, Mr. Speaker? The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Economic Development. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to be clear. What the Conservative Party is proposed yesterday is to cut the building of 8,000 affordable housing units in Quebec. I want to know if this member from Quebec, well, how they explain this to Quebecers, that they're cutting 8,000 affordable housing units. That's what this proposal would mean. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Chemin-Lévis.
Mr. Speaker, believe me, the Conservative leader built 195,000 new houses when he was a housing minister, which proves his competence. However, the Liberals continue to show their incompetence by doubling the cost of mortgage. When is the government going to allow Canadians to choose a common sense option to please Canadians by launching an election? The Honourable Minister of Tourism and Economic Development. Mr. Speaker, you know, when we talk about a housing crisis, we talk about housing supply, and this means affordable and social housing. Mr. Speaker, it's great that they're boasting about building housing, but we have built social housing that was affordable as well. And I repeat, Mr. Speaker, to the Conservative Party, 6 is the number of social housing units that they built. And when my family and I were looking for housing under the Conservative reign, we didn't find any social housing because they don't care about vulnerable people, and they don't care if people can pay for housing.
The Honourable Member from Victoria.
It's our body, our lives, our choice. Abortion care is health care. But the Liberals keep letting Conservative premiers erode access, while these Conservatives creep anti-choice legislation into Canada. Conservative cuts mean no family doctors, no midwives, no nurses to staff clinics. This isn't real access. Everyone should be able to get health care when they need it, including abortion care. Will the Liberals enforce the Canada Health Act to stop Conservative attacks on abortion?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Mr. Speaker, our message is clear. The right to an abortion and access to abortion go hand in hand, yet there are a growing number of anti-choice pregnancy crisis centers that use deceptive tactics to deter women from making informed choices about their reproductive health. That's why today I introduced a motion to require more transparency from these centers providing pregnancy counseling. Organizations that do not clearly or prominently provide this information to clients risk losing their charitable status. This is about holding them accountable. This is about supports that women can rely on.
The honourable member from Skeena, Bulkley Valley.
Mr. Speaker, last week the U.S. Department of Transport fined American Airlines $50 million for its horrible treatment of people with disabilities. Well, here in Canada, people have been dropped on the floor, they've had their wheelchairs broken and lost. One even had to drag themselves off a plane by their arms. And this government's response, wait for it, the minister held a summit with plenty of nice words and zero action. Why is it that the Americans get a Secretary of Transport that stands up for passengers, while here in Canada we get ministers of transport that continually cave to the big airlines?
Hear, hear. The Honourable President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to differ. I'm standing up in this House today after meeting with our government's Chief Accessibility Officer to definitively emphasize how important passenger safety and accessibility is for this government. And I will repeat that over and over again in this House and outside of this House. There is nothing more important than non-discrimination and more accessibility and safety for our air passengers, rail passengers, and freight passengers also. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Aurora, Oak Ridges, Richmond Hill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week we found out that an ex-Conservative MP left his party after seeing the increase in the number of anti-choice MPs in the caucus. Anti-choice organizations that support those MPs use deceptive tactics to push women away from making informed choices and accessing a full range of reproductive care through so-called pregnancy crisis centres. Can the Minister of Women and Gender Equality and Youth please share with this House what our government is doing to require more transparency from pregnancy crisis centres to encumber a woman's right to choose by providing biased and unscientific counsel?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
People have the right to make informed decisions about their own bodies. Across the country, we are seeing anti-choice pregnancy crisis center undermine a woman's right to choose. So today, I tabled a motion to require more transparency from charities providing pregnancy counsel. And if they do not, they stand the chance at losing their charitable status. Women have shared stories with me about how they have felt when they've walked into these centers, how they felt shame, how they felt guilt, and how it's been at the most difficult time in their lives. So, Mr. Speaker, this legislation ensures that no women will endure judgment or pressure from groups that restrict their freedom.
The honourable member from Calgary, Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this Liberal NDP government is not worth the cost. Mr. Speaker, over 2 million Canadians use a food bank on a monthly basis. In Calgary, food bank use is up 28% over the last year, and that's because this Liberal NDP government put a 23% punitive carbon tax on everything. So will this Prime Minister do the right thing, take responsibility for the mess that he created, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I challenge that member to point to a single thing that the Conservatives have done to help Canadians that are struggling. And it's easy. She can't, Mr. Speaker. It's appalling, Mr. Speaker. The three-word slogans on that side of the House are empty words. On this side of the House, we continue to make investments in things like the Canada Child Benefit, Mr. Speaker, the Canada Carbon Rebate, Mr. Speaker. On this side of the House, we'll continue fighting for Canadian families.
The honourable member from Calgary, Midnapore.
Mr. Speaker, the numbers don't lie. The Calgary Food Bank paid $10,000 in carbon tax, and that was to facilitate 41,000 visits. And that's because food bank use is up 300% since 2019, the year that the Liberal NDP government implemented their punitive carbon tax. So will the Prime Minister do the right thing, take responsibility for the mess that he created for the Canadians that he drove to the food bank, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Employment, Workforce Development and Official Languages.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member wants to talk about numbers and facts, so let's talk about the numbers and facts. 8 out of 10 Albertans get more money back from the Canada carbon rebate than they pay in the price on pollution. But, Mr. Speaker, the best solution to people who are struggling is a good job. $22 billion in investments from this government into the energy sector, into clean electricity, into carbon capture, use and storage, $25 billion for the healthcare system. Do you know what the price for a Conservative government would be, Mr. Speaker? $20,000 per Alberta family with one kid. That's a tax nobody can afford.
The Honourable Member from Portage Lisker.
After 9 years, these NDP Liberals are simply not worth the cost. Food Banks Canada reveals a devastating truth. Over 2 million Canadians are turning to food banks. They also report that up to 25% of Canadians are living in a state of poverty. In Manitoba, food bank usage has surged by 30% in just the last year alone. And despite this crisis, the Prime Minister still thinks it's some sort of a brilliant idea to quadruple the carbon tax. So when will the Prime Minister put an end to this misery and finally just call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity recently to be in Manitoba and to announce that Manitoba has signed on to our National School Food Program. This year alone, Mr. Speaker, 19,000 additional kids in that province will receive food at school through this program. That's real children and real food, not the bureaucracy that the Leader of the Conservatives would like to claim that this program is. That's the impact of the work that we're doing as we roll out this program across the country.
The Honourable Member from Portage Lisker.
Canadians recognize the impact of this Liberal government's policies, and it's that they're being recklessly driven into poverty. How many more families have to suffer? How long do the lineups at food banks need to be before this Prime Minister realizes that he and his government are the cause? Because if you tax the farmer who grows the food, the trucker who ships the food, and the grocer who sells the food, how can he be surprised when we're seeing record-breaking food bank use? Canadians want a carbon tax election. When will this Prime Minister give it to them?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader doesn't usually give press conferences.
Oh, Trudeau's still here.
That's why it's understandable that he goofed yesterday, and he admitted his true plan. He said, we're going to cut 2 programs for sure, and more beyond that.
Shame.
So now we all know the Conservative plan is one of cuts, cuts, cuts.
Shame.
They're going to cut that school food program that's going to feed 400,000 kids. They're going to cut dental care that has provided care to 1 million Canadians. They're going to cut pharmacare. They're going to cut early learning and childcare. But we won't let them.
That's right.
The Honourable Member for Avignon, La Métis, Matane, Matapédia. Mr. Speaker, at the Bordeaux prison in Montreal, the correctional officers say that there are so many drones that fly overhead that it's like an airport. They carry knives, drugs, and they smuggle in cell phones for the criminals in prison. And in Ottawa, they just sit back and sit idly by. Quebec is calling for phone signal jammers, and correctional officers want the same thing in federal prisons. But nothing is moving, except for the drones, of course. What is the minister waiting for to ban the use of cell phones in prison? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, on the contrary, we're not waiting. We're already rolling out a number of technologies in federal prisons And obviously, we can't discuss the details of this technology capacity in public. I have visited some of these federal penitentiaries in Quebec, and I've seen for myself that the application of these technologies works. And I've had a great discussion with Minister Bonnardel in Quebec to help Quebec with their prisons so that they have access to the same technology. The Honourable Member for Rivière-du-Nord. Mr. Speaker, the most serious problem with cell phones in prison is that it allows gang leaders to continue their criminal activities inside the walls. These bandits can take out contract killings against their enemies. They can burn down stores and make drug deals. In fact, they continue to represent a security threat to Quebecers and Canadians from federal prisons. This is proven, as we know, and the minister should know this. Why is he not working to ban once and for all the use of cell phones in penitentiaries? Thank you. The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, of course, we are acting exactly to prevent this issue, and my colleague knows this. I am going to be visiting a penitentiary on Friday with Minister Bonnardel, and we're going to discuss this issue, and I'll be very pleased to organize a briefing for my colleagues in the bloc to discuss the technologies that are in place. And it's not simple, so we can't give details in public on the floor of the House of Commons.
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years, these NDP Liberals aren't worth the misery. Every month in Ontario, 750,000 people must rely on food banks to get by. That's up nearly 10% over last year.
Shameful.
Worse, monthly visits by Ontario's children are up almost 117% since 2019. Despite these record numbers of children relying on these food banks, the NDP Liberals continue to increase the carbon tax by 23%, on the way to actually quadrupling it, making groceries even more expensive. How many more families must suffer before the Prime Minister calls an election?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Families, Children and Social Development.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been facing challenges in these expensive times, and that's exactly why we've been delivering programs to help them. Our $10 a day childcare program, Mr. Speaker, is saving families thousands of dollars each and every year. The National School Food Program, Mr. Speaker, which will see 400,000 additional kids receive food at school. The Conservatives would like to make you think they are pro-family, but we know that they will cut these programs at the first possible opportunity.
The honourable member from Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes, Brock.
Speaker, after 9 years, Indigenous peoples and families living in rural and remote Ontario know the NDP Liberals aren't worth the cost. The impact of the carbon tax on the cost of groceries is a real issue for those trying to make ends meet and feed their families. Hunger Count 2024 reports there are over 2 million visits to food banks across Canada in March of last year. That's up 90% since 2019. When will the Prime Minister stop ignoring the evidence, admit their carbon tax scheme isn't working, and call a carbon tax election?
The Honourable Minister for Indigenous Services.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. For a moment, I thought my official critic was going to ask a question about Indigenous peoples, but again, we saw a return to their talking points, not the kinds of things that matter to the First Nations people that I've been working so hard with, along with my colleagues. In fact, that member voted against Indigenous health care, Grassy Narrows care home, emergency management support, schools, roads, housing, water. You get the picture, Mr. Speaker. They're no friends to Indigenous people.
The honourable member from Coastal Bay Central, Notre Dame.
After 9 years, the NDP Liberals are not worth the cost. Yesterday, Food Banks Canada reported that the need for food banks is spiralling out of control, with 2 million Canadians per month depending on them. Demand at Bridges to Hope Food Bank in St. John's is expected to surge 30% compared to 2023. Despite record-smashing food bank usage, the NDP Liberals increased the cost of groceries by raising the carbon tax 23%. Mr. Speaker, instead of quadrupling the carbon tax, Well, they axe the tax so that people can afford to eat.
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Mr. Speaker, what they would axe in a place like Newfoundland, remember, the Conservative leader said the dental care program didn't exist. Right? Said it's not going to work, not going to happen. Newfoundland now happens to be one of the leading places in the country for people getting care. And on average, it's saving them $730. Do you know that what it's going to save our emergency rooms and creating space? About $1.8 billion, the opportunity to serve emergency rooms. Imagine those savings. That's what they're going to cut. So when they look vulnerable people in the eye, tell them the truth. Tell them what you're going to do. You're going to take away their dental care. You're going to make sure they don't get the diabetes medication they need, and that's going to cost them big money, Mr.
Speaker. The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition. Order.
Okay. Order, please.
The Honourable Member for Sudbury. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition continues to bury his head in the sand and refuses to take the security of our country seriously. All other party leaders have received their security clearance, but not him. Now, he doesn't understand clearly the importance of getting security clearance, so can the government explain to the rest of the Conservative members how important it is to protect our democracy?
Then I have
the Honourable Minister of the Environment and Climate Change. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to thank the member for Sudbury for her question. Our government recognizes the importance of protecting our country and our democratic institutions from the threat of foreign interference. That is why we offered all party leaders their security clearance. Now, the Conservative leader is the only one who is shirking his obligations. Why? Because if he had nothing to hide from Canadians, he would get his security clearance and his top secret briefing. Unfortunately, the Conservative leader is only in Ottawa to do what he's done best for 20 years. That is, serve his own interests at the expense of Canadians and their safety.
The Honourable Member from Kildonan and St. Paul.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of Liberals, crime is up and small businesses are fed up. The Liberal Prime Minister changed the laws to make it easier for violent repeat offenders to get bail, and now break-and-enters, thefts, vandalism have become everyday realities for small businesses in Canada. Nearly 60% of small businesses in BC, for example, are being directly impacted by crime. 8 in 10 are worried about their personal safety. This has cost businesses thousands of dollars, driving up costs of food and goods for their customers. When will the Liberals reverse their catch and release policy so that Canadians can shop safely and affordably once again?
Hear, hear. We're here. The Honourable Minister of National Defence.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I spent 39 years fighting crime in the city of Toronto, and one of the things I learned in that 39 years is that cops count. But, Mr. Speaker, today there are 700 fewer police officers in the city of Toronto than when I was the police chief. And those are the same cops, by the way, who fought guns and gangs, gave evidence at bail hearings, and kept our neighbourhoods safe. But just like the Harper government that cut 1,000 RCMP positions, Conservative mayors and premiers have frozen police hiring. This is the price we're all paying for reckless Conservative cuts. And if the Conservatives are looking for causation of the rise in crime, look.
The Honourable Member for Charlebourg and Seychelles. This Minister of Justice has showed us that he'd rather be soft on criminals than keep children safe. Paul Arcand reports that André Fèvre, a paedophile who led a social club of child abusers, which aimed to teach people how to lure and seduce children, was released by the parole board once again. The minister seems satisfied that experts say that his risk of reoffending is low, even though he has violated his conditions over and over the past 50 years. Is the minister aware of this? And if so, why is he not doing anything? The Honourable Minister of Public Safety. Mr. Speaker, my colleague knows very well that the parole board is independent. It's at arm's length from the government. It makes good decisions.
And these Liberals can't tie a tie.
What it takes seriously is public safety. We're not going to comment on individual cases that are before the parole board. We trusted the board's work. And however, as my colleague, the Minister of Defence, said, we are very surprised to see how many cuts the Conservatives have made to the RCMP and the CBSA, and now they claim to want to fight crime gangs.
From Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
After 9 years of NDP Liberals, taxes are up, costs are up, crime is up, and time is up. Now, Liberals have allowed fraudulent, non-Indigenous insiders and shell companies to steal contracts that had been earmarked for Indigenous businesses. Now that companies like Canadian Healthcare Agency and Dalian Enterprises, who got over $100 million each, have been removed from the Indigenous business list, they should pay back the money that had been set aside for Indigenous companies. When will this government get our money back from bad actors who pretended to be Indigenous?
Close. Here we go.
Minister of Public Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My colleague knows full well that audits are done regularly to ensure that things are done properly. What my colleague has not said, though, is whether he is in favor of these targets to be granted to Indigenous businesses.
Order. The Honourable Member from St. John's East.
Mr. Speaker, protecting a woman's right to control her own body includes access to clear and transparent choices in health care. Far too often we see actors operating in the charitable healthcare sector, victimizing vulnerable women seeking sexual and reproductive health services. Can the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance update the women of this country what this government is doing to ensure they are protected from these nefarious predators?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to really sincerely thank my colleague from St. John's East for her hard work for Canadian women. She is a nurse and she knows what she is talking about on this issue. Today, we introduced legislation that would deny charitable status to centres that fail to disclose services they do or do not offer. This is about telling the truth. It is about women and girls across our country having control of their own bodies. That is what our government is proud to stand up for. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, this week the Israeli Parliament banned UNRWA from operating in Israel-occupied East Jerusalem and designated this life-saving organization.
Colleagues, I need to hear the question. The Honourable Member from Edmonton Strathcona for the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, this week the Israeli Parliament banned UNRWA from operating in Israel and occupied East Jerusalem and designated this life-saving organization as a terrorist organization. Millions of Palestinians are living through hell and they need aid, and there is no aid organization that can do what UNRWA can do on the ground. Canada must act now. We cannot tolerate these outrageous attacks on the United Nations and international law. Will the government finally sanction Netanyahu and his extremist cabinet?
The Honourable Minister for International Development.
Mr. Speaker, we express serious concern about the passage of the legislation by the Israeli Parliament that undermines the operations of UNRWA. As the member opposite has stated, UNRWA is the backbone of the humanitarian response that supports over 2 million civilians in Gaza, Palestinian civilians. This poses a significant risk and an obstacle to more aid going in. We urge the Israeli government to allow UNRWA and the organizations that depend on UNRWA's network to do the work that is necessary to continue to deliver aid without obstruction. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member from Burnaby South.
That response did not respect the seriousness of what's going on and the dire situation that's going on. I want to take a moment now and talk about an event that's one of the premier events in Toronto, something that so many people come to, brings millions of people together, creates thousands of jobs. It's the Toronto Caribbean Carnival. It is one of the most important events in Toronto, but sadly, because of Liberal government underfunding, this festival is at serious risk. So will the Prime Minister commit today to the appropriate level of funding to protect this vital festival that celebrates Caribbean culture and the Caribbean diaspora in the GTA?
Here, here. The Honourable Minister for Diversity, Inclusion and Youth.
Mr. Speaker, for the last few years, this government and our government have been proud to support the Toronto Caribbean Festival. That's something that brings hundreds of thousands of people from around the world to the city of Toronto, and we're going to continue to work with the organization to support the work that they do in bringing and celebrating the Caribbean Festival in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Colleagues, it being 3:17.
The Honourable Minister is rising. On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, while my colleague was answering a question, the member for Charlebourg Haute-Saint-Charles referred to a member of the Conservative Party from Richmond, Arthabaska, a former member, used non-parliamentary language, disgraceful language. I ask him to withdraw his comments and apologize to the member, Mr. Speaker.
Sit down, Guibault.
I appreciate that point of order. The Speaker will listen to the recording and come back with this if necessary.
Honourable Minister, President of the Treasury Board and Minister of Transport is rising on a point of order. The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, when my honourable colleague was answering the question, they had my name up on the screen. I know that we're both of similar backgrounds, but we are different people, and I would really appreciate it if the correct name would be shown when the other person is speaking.
Let's do better. Good job.
I appreciate the Honourable Minister raising this point. It's one which we always strive. Order, please. It's order, please. It's one which the House of Commons, we always strive to making sure that we are accurate in what we do, and we apologize to the honourable member and to the two ministers, and we'll take measures to ensure that doesn't happen again. It being 3:19, the House will now proceed to the taking of deferred recorded division on the sub-amendment of Mr. Seaback to the motion to concur in the...
Okay. Hold on, let's actually just listen to what they're going to do. Yeah, okay. All right. So that's it for question period today. We are going to be live for question period tomorrow. Thursday, we're not going to be live for question period. It's Halloween, and I feel like the house is going to be quite... it might be busy. You guys can watch Poilievre or, watch another YouTuber, but I'm going to be really busy on Thursday. So I won't be doing any streams on Thursday, but we'll be covering committees and question period tomorrow. I'll go ahead and try and get my schedule out here in a sec. I'm just double checking to see what committees are doing what, and I'll let you guys know in a post shortly. I'm really surprised, though, just before we go here, I'm really surprised Pierre did not mention the foreign interference and the recent names that have been leaked. What I'm suspecting, and I said this yesterday when we watched the clip of MP Vyong speaking, is that I think that went against what Trudeau is going to say is he's going to say what MP Vyong said is against national security, and that I think Pierre's being told, probably by his House Whip, that if they go ahead and talk about this in the House of Commons, it's going to be against the interest of national security. I'm assuming that's why he hasn't talked about it yet. I can't think of any other reason why you would not use that as ammunition against the Liberal Party. I mean, literally MP Ning, or I can't say her last name, NG, Mary NG is sitting in the House. Baines is sitting in the House, and we know that they're conflicted. So I don't get it. I have absolutely no idea why that wasn't mentioned today. But anyway, yeah, as you guys know, Yeah, I agree. Pierre is smart. That's how Pierre plays like a pro. Yeah, I just don't. I think if Pierre says anything about it, he might get in trouble. So I think MP Vuong's actually probably getting talked to from CSIS and RCMP for releasing those names. But I mean, I think that was good work, especially Sam Cooper, the journalist who did all the investigative reporting. I think he did a really good job. Same with MP Vuong. NG equals Ing. So Mary Ing. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So, yeah, anyways, still a decent question period. I'm pretty sure Trudeau's going to be in the House tomorrow as well. Like I say, he doesn't release his itinerary until the day before. So he hasn't even released his itinerary for tomorrow. It's usually going to take a few hours. So tomorrow will be a wild ride. Yeah, Wednesdays are always spicy. So I'll see you guys for question period tomorrow, and there'll probably be a committee or two that I'm going to cover. So, but that'll be it for the week. And I'll try and get clips out on the weekend, but we'll probably just be back Monday. So. Their new nickname is Clips. All right, guys. Cheers. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. We'll see you tomorrow. Make sure you have a good, fantastic rest of your evening. Really appreciate the super chats from Mr. G and Laura B. Appreciate you guys.